OK, I want to go on to something now. As it turns out, that ugly incident last night, we'd planned tonight to talk about Indigenous disadvantage. There's been a lot of controversy, a lot of news in this area over the past month or so, especially given that Four Corners report in the Northern Territory. One of the things I wanted to bring to you was a very successful scheme that's going to the heart of how to redress Indigenous disadvantage. I think we all know one of the key factors has to be education. Well, the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation makes its business, its job, its charity, it's a non-profit organisation, but its job, its business is to get more Indigenous people through and give them a decent education, both through high school and into university. And I'm joined tonight by a couple of graduates from the AIEF, joining me here on the desk to hear about the story firsthand. First up, we've got Sarah Tracy from Broome in Western Australia. Thanks for joining us, Sarah. And Nirim Kalopi from Normanton in Queensland. Great of you to join us. I want to start off, we'll talk about some of the issues involved here, but let's start off, Sarah, by hearing about your story. Where were you raised and what sort of an education were you looking at there, and how has the scholarship changed your life?
Yeah, so I was born in Derby in Western Australia and then raised in Broome. And basically I was at St Mary's College from my kindergarten year right through to year 10. And then due to family circumstances, boarding school became an option for my brother and I. So that's when I came here to Sydney to attend Loreto Normanhurst under a AIEF scholarship. And I was very lucky to have done that because in Broome, when I was in high school, I didn't really view my education as quite a priority. And then, yeah, having the opportunity to come here and go to boarding school, it changed everything for me. And yeah.
It's an incredible move from Derby to Sydney for boarding school. Of course, a lot of kids around the country make that big shift, but you've gone on from there to university, and you're set to go into teaching.
Yes, so I'm in my third year currently, studying at Macquarie University and hoping to become a primary school teacher.
Great. And Nirim, you came from Normanton in the Gulf country of Queensland, and so where did you go to high school, and tell us what you're up to now?
So I was at primary school, Normanton State High School, right until year 7. And then we only have school to year 10 out in Normanton. So the option again came up for me to go away to boarding school as well. So my brother was sent 3 years before I went away, and then I followed in his footsteps. So I got sent to St Augustine's College in Cairns. I graduated from there in 2010, and I went straight into a Bachelor of Law degree at James Cook University in Cairns. I've jumped around a little bit since then. I studied education as well, secondary education for a number of years at James Cook University. But now I'm down at the University of Melbourne studying a Bachelor of Arts. Yeah, Bachelor of Arts, I hear you're studying politics, mate. I'd advise you against that. Do something more useful. Just dabbling at this point, Chris. Yeah, you've been looking at commerce as well. Yeah, that's my hope in 2017, to go into commerce with a double in accounting and finance. Well, tell us about this. We all know to get ahead in life that education is crucial, but especially if you're an Indigenous kid in a regional area, how much more difficult is it, and how much does it help to actually get away, to move cities and go into a boarding school? I think the biggest challenge for Indigenous students, particularly from rural and remote areas like Sarah and I, would just be the cultural context and the change within that. Growing up on country, surrounded by a lot of family, where both towns have majority Aboriginal population, to being sent to prestigious boarding schools, private boarding schools, I think the biggest challenge will be the cultural context change and being able to adapt within that. But it's crucial, it's vital that even for myself, my experience, it really helped to be able to branch out, see the other side of the fence, as you will, and really interact with mainstream culture. It must be incredibly tough. It's tough for any kid going to boarding school, of course, leaving family behind, but when it's a big cultural shift, it must make it more difficult. How do you get through that? What sort of help do you do to get through that? And do many scholarships from Indigenous communities end up being not completed? Do people want to go back? Yeah, well, I think for myself, really making friends with a lot of the other Indigenous students from rural and remote areas got me through high school. We're all going through the similar cultural change. We're all going through similar challenges. So having other Indigenous students around me to support me really got me over the line.
Well, Sarah, I mean, one of the issues is if you're living in a regional community, particularly the more remote, the more this is true, that the education there is often not as good. A lot of people will look to boarding school to get that better education. Just tell me about why you sought that education away. What drove you to seek a better education, even though it meant leaving home?
Well, for myself, personally speaking, my family story, it was family circumstances that boarding school became an option. I didn't actually want to go, but then once I did go, I realised how amazing the opportunity was and how much it changed my life. So I think for a lot of families as well, it's not, I think it is an option that they have to take if they get into their high school year and realise that the education isn't as good. But yeah, so
if other kids in the community though want to do that, I mean, you need to have the desire to actually go and get the education.
I think so too.
And then the cost, of course, has got to be prohibitive for most people.
Absolutely. I think it really comes down to family support. I think if you're going away, you need your family to back you and so that you can get through it, because it, as Nirim was speaking, it's a huge culture shock, and I know for me, my family got me through that.
Yeah, now, of course, especially when you're talking about remote and regional communities, not everybody can go away and get a boarding school education and a university education. So what's the answer for those who don't go away? What's the answer to improve the education outcomes for people in those more distant communities, do you think?
Well, I know that there's different success stories. Even if they didn't go to boarding school and receive a quality education and they did stay at home, they're still getting into full-time job and working at the end of the day. So I think it's different that they didn't go away and get a education, go to university, but they're still working and they're employed and they're at home. Not always, but I think there is different success stories in that sense. Yeah,
now, of course, I don't want to give the wrong idea about this scholarship scheme. Not everybody's from a remote community or regional communities. I think it's about over half are from country areas or remote areas, but almost half from the cities as well, Indigenous people from the cities. Tell us what you think, Nirim, when it comes to the importance of education. We all know about Indigenous disadvantage. We all know that there are issues with health, and we don't have that joblessness is higher in Indigenous communities, that crime rates, that far too many Indigenous people end up incarcerated. Give us your thoughts on the role education plays in all of that.
I think education is crucial. We name these things incarceration rates, poverty, things that are happening in Indigenous communities, communities all across Australia. I think an education allows someone to break out of the cycle of poverty mentally as well, to be able to say, I can see something bigger for myself. Although this might be the reality for a lot of Aboriginal people around Australia, I will refuse to let this reality become mine. So an education gives them the tools and the resources to be able to do that. And I think it's vital that we have Aboriginal people who are becoming professors, going to universities, becoming leaders in their faculties at universities, because it enables an academic pioneering for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people. So we can see, and the rest of Australia can see, that we are an educated people and that we can learn.
Is there an unfair burden on young people like yourself who have got these scholarships and doing this sort of thing? I mean, you want to make a life for yourself, you want to be successful, you've chosen your careers, but is there an expectation that you also have to be sort of role models, that you are breaking down barriers for others behind you or alongside you?
No, absolutely. There is an expectation that we give back, that some of the successes that we have, we then take back to our communities. I wouldn't call it a burden, though. It's definitely something that is challenging, but it's something that's also very rewarding.
You embrace that?
Absolutely. I think that once I can make it out of the community, make something of myself, get my university degree, hopefully I can inspire 10 more young Indigenous people to do the same thing.
Yeah, fantastic. And Sarah, I know from what you've had to say previously that when it comes to teaching, when you are a primary school teacher, you want to go back and teach in remote communities, but maybe not forever, but certainly to do that for a while. Yeah. That's your way of sort of...
Absolutely, and as you say, I don't think it's a burden, and also you feel like it's an obligation. Having had the opportunity to come over and receive a quality education for myself, I now feel like I'm obligated to go back and help others receive the same opportunity.
Well, when you were growing up in Derby, I call it
So,
Derby.
yeah,
Derby,
sorry,
Derby.
yeah.
I don't know. When you were growing up, did you have Indigenous teachers then?
Yeah.
Or you did?
No, so I was raised in Broome, so I grew up in Broome, and there were definitely Aboriginal TAs, so teacher assistants,
Yep.
but not so much Aboriginal teachers. There were I think in primary school, the head of primary was Aboriginal, so it was definitely a thing. It wasn't, you didn't not see Aboriginal teachers, so I was aware of it.
Yeah, but so do you think that it will help to see more
Oh,
Aboriginal teachers?
absolutely. I know that when I went into my prac and I taught in a remote Aboriginal community in 2014, the kids there, they couldn't believe that I was Aboriginal and I was a teacher. They really questioned me on that and said, can we do that as well? Can we become teachers? And I think that was really important.
All right, so this foundation, the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation, very much the brainchild of Andrew Penfold, who was going to join us tonight, but he's unwell, so we hope you're coming along okay, Andrew. But very much his brainchild, and more than 500 scholarships out there now, mainly for kids going up to year 12, but about 60 in university. Not everybody can, of course, get a scholarship. I mean, he's looking to expand this. He wants more government support to match the private support to expand this, and that's great news. But what about the kids who don't get scholarships? I'm very interested in your insights from both of you. Let's start with you, Nirim. We hear a lot about Indigenous education rates, truancy, getting kids along to school, getting them to become ambitious for themselves, the disadvantage they might face when they then apply for a job. Tell me, what are your insights from this, from the kids you grew up with who perhaps aren't doing as well as you?
Well, a lot of the students who I went to primary school with, maybe 30% went on to high school. From that, even less graduated. And I'm the only one from my year 7, 8 class from back in Normanton to be at university.
The critical question there, that's a terrible setback for them in their life in terms of their ambitions and employment opportunities. Why do you think why is that happening? Why aren't they completing school?
For me, I think having two parents who are university educated, there was the expectation on me to at least graduate from year 12. I also had a very strong intrinsic motivation to get an education at high school and also go on then to university. I think for a lot of these students in rural areas, they just mightn't have that ambition. Growing up out in the bush, seeing their uncles who are stockmen, maybe they just want to become that, and that's fine as long as they are being productive members of the community. At the end of the day, university, finishing high school isn't for everyone, especially for a lot of students out there. And one of the things with AIEF is that we want students on the program who want to be there. So students who are on the programs are ones that want the education. They're ambitious, they want to do well. So I think that for those students who aren't necessarily getting onto the program, it mightn't be the end for them.
What about your thoughts, Sarah? What do we need to do to make sure there is more success coming out of young Aboriginal lives?
I think it just comes down to education. The more that we can get into these communities and provide quality educations, that they can grow up and realise that they can get a job and they can become teachers and they can become whatever they kind of set their minds to. And I think Nirim made a really good point. Even if it's not going to university and becoming successful lawyers, or as long as they're giving back to their community, and because it's not everyone's.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Any sort of work, as Nirim said, productive employment, productive lives. Is that one of the things that you would like to bring to bear, I suppose, as a teacher, just to try and
just inspire? Absolutely, just kind of be able to inspire them to say that there is more to life than outside of your community, and you can find employment and give back and come back into the community and give back.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing your stories with us. So it is a fantastic program. Anybody who's got any chance to support the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation, do so, and tell your politicians it's a good investment of taxpayers' money, because they only pay for people who graduate. They only pay for successful outcomes, which is like well over 90% of them anyway. But I'm going to put you on the spot while I've got both of you here. I'm going to put you on the spot on just on the political situation. There's a lot of talk about issues of reconciliation. Of course, there's been the Indigenous recognition movement that's sort of been stalled effectively. The referendum won't be going ahead next year. You heard me at the start talk about that horrible incident of racism directed at Eddie Betts last night in Adelaide. Overall, what's your sense of this country and the way we're dealing with reconciliation, the way that Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians are getting along. Are you positive? Are you pessimistic? Just your thoughts.
I mean, there's a lot of educating that needs to happen, and I think my personal view is that there needs to be a lot more acknowledgement of the past, and I think that will allow people to move forward, because really recognising that Australia does have a black history and taking time to bring that into classrooms and into universities and Indigenous studies, and allowing people to kind of really learn about what went on so that we can move forward, because I don't think there's enough acknowledgement of the past.
Yeah, what about you, Nirim? Are we stumbling along and somehow clumsily getting there, or are we making a hash of it?
Well, I think that's how Australia's always done it, stumbling along. But I think that we are learning slowly. Even the incident with Eddie Betts last night, now that that's become such a controversial topic in media over the last 24 hours, I think says a lot about how Australia's growing as a country. We're a young country. We've got a lot of reconciling to do. A lot of educating to do, but I think there are exciting times ahead. I'm very optimistic. There's a lot of the talk of treaties happening across Australia has become quite vocal. So whether it be treaty or recognise the fact that that's even being discussed on a national forum is very optimistic for me.
Well, thanks a lot to both of you for coming in tonight. I appreciate your time, Nirim and Sarah. There you go. We hear a lot of bad news in this space. There are good things happening, and you've just met two of them. So do what you can to support that Education Foundation and other good works around the place. After the